benefits we got from the war in Ukraine have ended, I would say, in 2024.
And if anyone parasitized war, that was Georgian Dream and Ivanishvili's government.
Unfortunately, Georgian Dream done almost nothing to make our economy more resilient.
When a government is telling me what to sell, when to sell, and how much to charge for it, well, that reminds me of a Soviet economy and exactly why Soviet economy and Soviet Union collapsed.
To legitimize and secure their power, they need to control economy as well.
Hello and welcome to Talk Georgia, which is my English podcast covering Georgian and regional politics. To dive into the key developments of today's Georgia's politics, the business and economy, we are privileged to be joined by Dr. Goga Khishtovani, who is the full professor at Ilia State University. He serves as head of the MBA program in finance and the PhD program in business and administration. Goga is a Georgian and German educated. He holds a PhD in economy and business administration from University of Bremen. He also studied at University of Trier and Georgia's Technical University, which miraculously survived abolition. Goga has 15 years of professional experience across the public, private, non-governmental and academic sectors in Georgia and abroad. And he's done projects with the World Bank and the IFC and European Commission and ADB and the GIZ. So he fulfilled all the benchmarks to be a foreign agent and qualifies to join Talk Georgia's show. So Goga, very welcome to the show. Please feel free to add anything to my limited introduction of your biography before we get down to business, which is to talk Georgian business and economy.
Thank you very much, Giorgi. Nice to be here. I'm honored to be participating in this podcast. Nothing to add. I think next time I need to delete some issues rather to add from my bio. But thank you for the invitation again.
Okay, so let's dive into the Georgian economy and 2025, which Geostat figures say that Georgia had 7.5% economic growth. And that was kind of confirmed by the IMF as well. They say it's 7.1%, but anyway, so it's above 7%, which is impressive growth. I mean, you can't say anything about, even if you take a look at the region and we see like Armenia had 5% growth, Azerbaijan 3% growth, Turkey slightly more than 3%. The Russian economy didn't really grow. Ukraine had 2% growth, etc. So in the region and even in Europe, Georgian economic growth is impressive. But the reality is that the average Georgian didn't really feel this growth, but they did feel inflation, which is 5% according to Geostat. And also what Geostat says that, again, grocery and healthcare prices basically grew bigger than some of the other services. Okay, which means that, again, the food prices went up more than 5%. It could be 7, could be 10. I didn't really dig into the breakdown of that.
It's more than 10.
But anyway, so again, average Georgian feels inflation pretty well, but we didn't really feel any growth. So what's going on? I mean, is this real growth or is the figures doctored? And if this is the real growth, where the growth is going then?
Giorgi, very good and very interesting question. And I think I can explain why majority of Georgians doesn't feel this economic growth. And I would argue that this growth is very much one-sided, I would say so. And what I mean is that, and if you look how Georgian Dream presents these growth figures, they usually concentrate on one real growth rate, but never mention sectoral growth figures. So I haven't heard even once from them that, well, let's say, this particular sector in our economy is growing that fast. And this has very particular explanation, and it is that, as I mentioned, it's very much one-sided. We have certain sectors. First of all, it's information and communication. We can refer to it as ICT, which is growing extraordinarily fast. It will be around, we just have at that point figures from 3 quarters, but it would be, I assume, at least 30%, 30, real growth. And this sector is becoming one of the largest sectors in Georgian economy and has a share in GDP almost 8%. But at the same time, we have sectors of real economy, I would argue, with real economy, like construction, trade, manufacturing, agriculture, energy, which have negative growth or very tiny growth. I would say, for instance, construction in last available the data we have is from third quarter in 2025 is growing 0.2%. Let's say manufacturing is growing 2.5%. And why I'm saying this is that where people are employed, in the sectors where the majority of Georgians are employed, those sectors are barely growing. And some of them are even have negative growth. It means they're declining. But at the same time, there are certain sectors, especially information and communication, with extraordinary high growth. And I would say it's inflates this, let's say, this figure, 7.5%. Other sectors, I would mention here two, is education, which is growing quite fast. And its third one is logistics and transportation, which is growing also in double figures. But here I want to emphasize on information and communication because this sector, this growth is quite peculiar. And I would even argue it's quite unsustainable or at least risky one. And I try to explain why, Georgi, is because basically this growth depends on growth of so-called international IT companies. Maybe you have heard that there is we have kind of a tax haven for IT companies in Georgia who are exporting their services abroad. It started in 2020, and it means basically that subsidiaries of large IT companies abroad or Georgian companies who became so-called, who get the status of international IT companies are paying minimal taxes. They're just paying 5% of corporate tax, and their employees are paying just 5% of income tax. That's it. And basically, this creation of this tax haven, and at the same time, immigration of number of Russians and citizens of Russia or citizens of Belarus stimulated the growth of this particular sector. And the main contributor of this extraordinary growth in this particular sector are those international IT companies. What is the problem here? There are, one certain problem. It is that it does not really affect Georgian economy. Why? Because it has minimal fiscal effect, because those companies and their employees are paying almost minimal taxes, and it does not also affect really employment, because the number of people employed on those companies are at highest 10,000 person. And out of 10,000, maybe the majority are Russians and people from Belarus, citizens of Belarus, living in Georgia. So basically, the fastest growing sector in Georgia is the sector which does not really have positive impact on real Georgian economy. And the only thing is that if those people are living in Georgia and spending their, let's say, salary in Georgia, that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And secondly, and I just can speculate here, that the figures are so impressive that I can even speculate that maybe those international IT companies who are registered in Georgia are doing their projects from Georgia, even when no Georgians are, let's say, delivering those services, and no real economic activity except getting funds from abroad and sending those funds from Georgia elsewhere is affected. What I mean is that these figures are so extraordinary that I even can speculate that maybe those companies are using Georgian legislation because of those tax benefits, just to for reasons like registering their projects in under Georgian jurisdiction, but no real economic benefit is there for Georgian economy and Georgian citizens. And why I'm saying this, that Georgia became very dependent on, not Georgia, Georgian economic growth figures became very dependent on those high growth figures. And it's risky because if those companies someday decide to leave Georgia, because, for instance, Armenia will offer them better conditions, or maybe because export of those services are usually we are exporting our IT services to European Union or US, and maybe because of worsened relationship between Georgia and EU and US.
Sorry, let me stop you there.
Yeah.
So I think we'll get to the risks of the 2026 and later. But before that, let's dig into the background. How did we get to this 7.5% growth? Again, I took a good look at the last 5 years of Georgian economy. And, starting from 2020, which was a COVID year, Georgian economy subtracted, I think, at 6.something%. And then we had exponential growth, like double-digit growth 3 years in a row. In 2021, it was 10 or 11%, 2022, the same, 2023, again, double-digit. I understand that partly it was that Georgian economy and the world economy recovered from COVID in 2021, and that obviously if you had 3 or 4% growth, you would get 10% growth because of the COVID year before. And then Russia attacked Ukraine, and all those, the inflow of people and money, and also possible the Russia getting sanctioned from the democratic world, that obviously benefited the Georgian economy because of the Russia becoming an international pariah, and then all those trade routes that was going through Russia basically were blocked. Obviously, the Georgia got an advantage out of that. So my question to you is that, and again, if you tell us a bit more about how Georgian Dream parasitized on, war, Russia, Ukraine war. And again, when I'm thinking back to this, and obviously, and as you mentioned in your talk, that the Georgian people as general, or an average Georgian, least benefited from this economic growth, but the Georgian Dream itself benefited quite a lot. I would say that if anyone in the world benefited from Russia-Ukrainian war financially, ideologically, or propaganda-wise, that Georgian Dream. And if anyone parasitized war, that was Georgian Dream and Ivanishvili's government. Can you tell us a bit more how Georgian economy got there and became attachment to a kind of Russian economy? Because the Georgian economy is feeding Russian economy, well, in my opinion. And one more point, what I did, I compared Georgian economic figures to Central Asian countries like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and you get the exactly the same growths, exactly the same kind of movements, the exponential growth of this export and re-export. Yeah, tell us a bit more about that.
Let me start agreeing with you, Georgi, that Georgian economy is one of the major beneficiaries of Russian invasion in Ukraine. And in the period of 2022-2024, our economy benefited hugely from this tragic event. How? So let me start with listing elements or factors which have contributed to this. First, it was immigration. We can say now that in the first 3 years of the war, around 80,000 Russian citizens have arrived into Georgia. And those were high earners, mainly IT specialists. It's related to the first question. And it has stimulated a lot Georgian consumption, but not only. It has stimulated our construction sector a lot because those people have started to buy property in Georgia, and it has stimulated IT sector, but it has also stimulated really consumption. And one of the reasons I would argue of this inflationary pressure is also this, that if high spenders are coming to your country and in large numbers, it affects also inflation figures. Second aspect, it was, and we need to mention this here, I guess, as well, it was international students. In 2020-2021 academic year, we had just, I guess, 16 or 17,000 foreign students. And in last academic year, not in last, in 2024-25, we already had 37,000.
That's kind of doubled,
more than doubled. And in this academic year, as far as I know, it's not official, but I heard that it's almost 45 already. What is happening that a lot of students from different, mainly Asian countries who were studying in Ukraine have decided because of war to come to Georgia. But also it was a quite big boost for Georgian higher education sector, because those are students who are paying higher tuition fees, high tuition fees, and also they have spend money for living here. So it has also affected Georgian economy. But main, I guess, effect was this indirect trade or direct trade of different, also European countries with Russia, indirect trade, basically, via Georgia. And the best example is cars, because now you imagine 40% of Georgian export are cars. It's basically re-export of cars. And we should not it should mention that on paper, we are barely exporting cars to Russia. But we should understand that majority of cars we are exporting to Kyrgyzstan, to Kazakhstan, to Tajikistan, to Turkmenistan, basically are real exports to Russia. And this is a very good example because you can see that we became, I guess, kind of a hub of indirect trade with Russian Federation. And this has also positively affected Georgian economy. Basically, if you look at figures on, let's say, sectors like logistics and transportations, we have double-digit figures in the last couple of years. And why? Because transportation and logistics sectors benefited a lot, because Georgia was kind of a hub for this transportation of goods from all over the world to Georgia and from Georgia to Russia. And here I want to say, I guess, very important thing is that there was two phases. And the first phase was years 2022, 2024, where I would argue that not only, let's say, Georgian Dream has benefited, but also Georgian citizens have benefited from this war in Ukraine, and that Georgia became kind of a beneficiary of all the events. And you can look at figures, let's say employment, salaries, and so on, and you can see that there was impressive growth in employment figures, impressive growth in real salary growth. But I would argue that it has ended in 2024. In 2025, it was kind of a transition year, in a sense that on the one hand, Georgian Dream was much needed for Georgian Dream for its own legitimization, to argue that this economic growth miracle is continuing. But on paper, almost this getting benefits from the war in Ukraine stagnated a lot. And this is the reason why I would say that, for instance, we mentioned this 7.5% economic growth, but at the same time, you can see on employment figures that number of employed people in 2025, the latest figure we have is from third quarter 2025, have decreased in compared to third quarter 2024. So less people are employed in Georgia in 2025 than in 2024. Another very important figure is it's about salary growth. In 2023-2024, we had around 12-14% real salary growth of employed people in Georgia. And in 2025, the latest figure we have, the real growth, when we include here inflation as well and adjust, is just 5%. So, and this all, Giorgi, for me, explains what is currently happening in Georgian economy. This, let's say, the benefits we got from the war in Ukraine have ended, I would say, in 2024. 2025 was a kind of a transition year. Many figures have stagnated. Let's say employment figures, salary growth figures, the growth rates of major real economy sectors. And what left was the sectors which doesn't really affect Georgian society, especially the vulnerable part of Georgian society. But at the same time, what we have is that inflation is 5%. Inflation on grocery and medicine is 10%. And this is where we are now, where we have stagnating economy with high inflation rates. And I think that this situation explains a lot what is happening currently in Georgian politics and in Georgian economy, because I would say on the one hand, this economic miracle disappeared, and on the other hand, it's much risky, because then just we won't have impressive growth rate, because if war in Ukraine ends, Georgian economy is in real trouble.
Let's look ahead now and what is awaiting us. You said that, well, we have now stagnating economy compared to the previous years. And this war effect is cooling off, even if the war continues. The effect will cool off anyway, kind of. But again, let's imagine that war stops next year, which is likely, I would say. I mean, it is difficult, but still, if you take a look how the positions are getting closer in negotiations, etc., well, that's quite realistic that next year the war finishes. So that's one factor, how it would affect Georgia's economy. The second thing, as you mentioned, is the political instability and non-recognition of Ivanishvili's regime. Because, again, when we had this exponential double-digit growth, so politically, Georgia was stable, more or less, and nobody cast any doubt over the legitimacy of the Georgian government. But now it is not recognized by the democratic world. Third factor is that, again, 3 years ago, Georgia was a country that had a clear European path. It was granted European candidate status that boosted also Georgia's economy and confidence in Georgia's financial and economic sectors. And now we have this reverse process. Georgia is distancing itself from the European Union. More than that, the de facto Georgian government portrays democratic world and European Union as an enemy, not as an ally, for example, or a bloc where in the future the Georgia will become part of. So, and last but not least, as you mentioned, that Armenia is kind of catching up. Yesterday it was that the American vice president visited Armenia, though they signed a deal that would bring $9 billion in Armenian nuclear industry or nuclear sector. A few months back, the NVIDIA, the world's biggest company, signed a deal with Armenians to start a factory for computer chips in Armenia. So again, if Armenian economy is opening up to the democratic world and kind of plays an alternative to Georgian economy, because until now, Georgian economy was one of the most open, if not the most open economies in the region, even compared to the Turkish or Armenian or some of the other economies, with a very advanced banking sector, which was basically, I would say, up to the European or even higher standards. Now, with all these factors, this cooling off, the war effect, Georgia retracting from the European Union, and Armenia catching up, what dangers or opportunities, I don't know, poses that for Georgian economy in 2026 and the years to come?
Thank you, Georgi. I see a lot of risks facing Georgian economy. First of all, when, and I hope it will happen, the war in Ukraine ends, this new role or new function of Georgia will immediately disappear. And what I mean is that, let me just list, for instance, let's take tourism. Because Russians are limited to visit, let's say, Western European countries, or hesitant to do so, almost 25% of all visitors to Georgia are from Russia. Mm-hmm. And almost 20% of revenues from tourism is coming from Russia. And if war ends and Western countries will start to talk with Russia and do business with Russia and travel to Russia, and the Russians will have start to travel to Europe, it will definitely affect Georgian tourism sector. Let's take immigrants. If war ends, some of Russians living in Georgia will go back to Russia. Some of them will maybe decide to go to Europe. but not to stay here. And their departure will also negatively affect Georgian economy and also negatively affect Georgian housing market, which can become immediately under a huge risk. Let's
It's
take
inflated anyway already.
let's take trade. And if you look at our export figures, real export figures, because I want to include Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, those are exports to those countries, but in reality are exports to Russia. You can see that if Russia can directly do business with European countries and with USA, with all over the world, with India or other countries, they won't need Georgian economy anymore as a transit country. And it will affect Georgian trade, it will affect Georgian logistics industry, Georgian transportation industry. So Georgia will lose a lot immediately, I would argue, after the war in Ukraine ends. And Russia most probably, it sounds sad, but most probably will be able to do business with the world again, as it was before they started invading Ukraine. This is one aspect. It will then, and immediately it will affect number of sectors in Georgia. And also in 2025, for instance, and I will switch to your question about Armenia. In 2025, Georgian Dream introduced IT residency hastily because, and in their explanatory note presented to the Parliament of Georgia, they mentioned that if we don't give Russian and Belarusian IT specialists proper conditions to live in Georgia, they are leaving the country. So Georgian, not only tourism sector or housing, ICT sector, which is the largest contributor of Georgian economic growth, is hugely dependent on Russian citizens and Belarusian citizens living in Georgia. And I would assume that if they have ways to go to Europe, to return back to Russia, or other possibilities, and they decide to leave Georgia, it will also affect IT industry as well. And now about this geopolitics and how GD managed to cut almost all the ties with European Union, and at the same time Armenia is creating new ties with EU. I would say that it's also a risky thing for us because, for instance, let's take this particular ICT sector. As I mentioned, 2/3 of our export goes to European Union, Great Britain, or USA. And if somehow those countries will ban our export of IT services to European Union or USA.
Like they did with Russia or Belarus, for example. Yeah.
And suddenly Armenia is their new strategic partner. And Armenia will decide to create similar tax, let's say, exemptions for companies now registered in Georgia. This 8% of Georgian GDP can suddenly disappear.
Relocate there.
And those are in the past when it was about factories and when it was about the land, it was not easy to relocate. But now those companies, I argue, that can in 1 or 2 weeks immediately relocate their offices, their staff from Georgia to Armenia. And suddenly Georgian economy will lose, let's say, not maybe directly 8, but 5% of its GDP. And so I would say that geopolitics matters as well. But what I want to argue here, Georgi, is that unfortunately Georgian Dream done almost nothing to make our economy more resilient and prepared for such events. Because I would say they could anticipate that sooner or later the war will end, and Georgian economy has somehow to survive after the war as well. And the strategy of neglecting this fact and at the same time cutting ties with our strategic partners in the European Union and USA, it doesn't look very smart. And finally, you asked also about how Georgian Dream benefited before. And I would bring just one figure, Georgi. Our tax revenues from 2021 to 2025, just tax revenues, increased by 128%. So when we are hearing now the stories about corruption within the Georgian Dream parties, we should know that Georgian budget had at least doubled as much money to spend in 2025 than it had in 2021. And what we now see, all of us, that the main goal of GD officials was to somehow, during this spending, get as much money as possible from the state budget. And but it is also ending. And somehow I can explain this anti-corruption purge, which is
hysteria.
What is happening with the fact that if you look deeply into in the state fiscal figures, you can see that when in the last couple of years, each year, for instance, Georgian budget had at least 20%, or in average, I would say, 20% more tax revenues than it had year before.
Yeah.
In 2025, it was just 9.6% higher. And if you include here that inflation was 5%, it means that it was not so impressive than it was years before. And in 2026, Georgi, they expect to have just 5% more tax revenues than in 2025, when inflation is also around 5% at this point. It means that not only economy faces huge risks, the government of Georgia has less resources to somehow, let's say, address those risks and somehow, let's say, be ready to and get more resilient. And everything what is happening now, this maybe we will have a chance to talk about these issues about prices. Okay. Issues about creating state banks. I guess it's very much related to the fact that Georgian Dream understands quite well that Georgian economy and Georgian Dream itself is in a big trouble.
Okay, I think you kind of directed the talk into the direction that I was thinking to move. Let's get down to the real day-to-day issues that we are getting from the Georgian Dream. And something that you see partly explains this panic and hysteria that the Georgian Dream is showing about the corruption or prices, or again, that to me, that shows that as time goes, it is becoming more and more difficult to sustain the power. Because again, as we speak, Georgian Dream is getting more and more authoritarian. And when you're getting more authoritarian, authoritarianism is moving into totalitarianism. And, well, to sustain authoritarianism, maybe it needs a certain amount of money. But when it consolidates and it runs into totalitarianism, that needs a lot more resources compared to when you are just an authoritarian, right? And again, let's take a look. I have, number of questions here. And the first is this. Again, when a government is telling me what to sell, when to sell, and how much to charge for it, well, that reminds me of a Soviet economy and exactly why Soviet economy and Soviet Union collapsed. And that also reminds me of a Cuban and Venezuelan and North Korean people who are poor and miserable. And that's a crystal clear signal to me that Georgia is also heading into that direction. And on the other hand, what I also understand that when the Georgian Dream is thinking how to correct prices, how to regulate prices, and to show to the Georgian population that the prices is something that you care about and also what we care about. Well, that's a PR exercise, I understand. But at the same time, when they are storming the offices of the supermarkets and supply chains and all that, well, that's the terror, and that's an attempt to control business. Again, my question to you is, so is this a sign that the Georgian economy is moving from open, market-oriented into something more controlled Soviet type? Or it's just PR exercise and Georgian Dream government is trying to subjugate business players and play a PR trick to the people that, we care about prices and we do something at least, just to bring them down. And it's not about groceries, it's about fuel, it's about medicine, it's about even education. And after this question, I'll move to that part if we have time, because
Sure.
you do full-time job at the Ilia State University, so this economic reform, not economic, but the educational reform would, I assume, affect Georgian economy as well.
I think that, as I mentioned before, 2025 was a kind of transition year. I would say it was the end of a really impressive economic period of Georgia, but it was not inherent. It was not, let's say, the result of let's say, very innovative or very impressive economic policy. It was just coincidence and good luck that we benefited so much, our economy benefited so much from the tragic events in Ukraine. And it's ended in 2025. And I would argue that the Georgian Dream became kind of a hostage of its own PR narrative. What I'm saying is that it's all the time to repeat that this economic growth miracle of Georgia and how they even tried to convince own supporters that everything is great. It made them vulnerable because I argue that they already knew in 2025 that things are going in the wrong direction, and all the economic figures are showing in good way stagnation or even worse, negative development. And I would say that everything what's now happening is a kind of a reaction of on that. And on your first question, I don't think it's just let's say PR that they want to show that they're caring, and they want to show that they want to somehow punish bad businesses. It's more, unfortunately. And I think this is a kind of a strategy how they can fix the system before it will get worse. And it's not enough and they understood, I would argue that they understood just fixing politics is not enough. Because I say fixed politics, they almost made politics and doing politics as a criminal act, but they see the necessity of fixing economy as well. And here is, I also sometimes referring that it's very similar to what happened in Soviet period in 100 years ago, where Bolshevik party wasn't aware how to organize the system. They played with a market economy as well, but finally they understood that to legitimize and secure their power, they need to control economy as well. And unfortunately, everything what's now happening is this transition from the liberal economy, or at least effort to transform this liberal economic model into more state-led Chinese style state capitalism model. I'm not sure how further it will progress. It depends on certain factors, but everything, starting with grocery, so regulate how they think to regulate grocery markets, how to regulate pharmacy sector, how to think to regulate hospitality sector, or announcing, and how they even approach education sector, gives me an impression that Georgian Dream understands that they are limited in time. Most probably, surveys they are usually conducting shows that they are losing popularity even among their own supporters, and they need to act, and they need to act fast. And I think that everything, starting from anti-corruption campaign, price fixing, security services are investigating prices of rice and sugar in groceries. Everything is part of this plan of, let's say, having full control over economy. And this is, I guess, and also this creation of, let's say, development bank. It's also part of it. If you listen carefully, what they are saying is that we will select particular sectors which are underfunded, and then start funding them and start to develop them. So everything gives me an impression that it's for real. Of course, it depends on how long this current Georgian Dream management will be in power. I mean, except Mizina Ivanishvili, this current team. But they are in hurry, and they can, I guess, bring a lot of harm to Georgian economy, because I think that what keeps Georgian economy afloat is this still this liberal model in every sector, and this real competition among players, which gives kind of a drive to Georgian economy. And if it ends, I think we will be in much bigger trouble than we are now.
Again, last but not least, because you were full-time working for university, and obviously, and there's a big issue, this educational reform, that also will have economic consequences. I don't really want to talk about the academic part of the reform, which is a disaster, and I think that everybody agrees on that. But I think it would be interesting from your perspective to concentrate on what would be the economic consequences if the reform is done as it is presented now. For example, you mentioned that for the last few years, a number of foreign students doubled in Georgia, and that played their share, or a lion's share, in the Georgia's economic growth. But what we see now is that according to this the reform, we know that people will be studying less. Let's say, okay, the school years will be down to 11 years. First degree, a bachelor's degree, would be able to obtain in 3 years, and then you will have extra year to get your master's degree. So which means that you are learning 3 years less than you used to. So it also means that there will be less students in numbers, because this idea of one city, one faculty would shrink the number of faculties, obviously, and that would automatically shrink number of students. And last but not least, the state universities would not be allowed to accept foreign students, which means that part of the students will obviously go to the private universities, but some of them will go out of Georgia. Because, for example, when I am from India, for example, and I want to become a doctor, and the Georgian Medical University has got this good school of medicine and history and all that stuff, and then suddenly one of the maybe very good private university starts a new medical school, it is not attractive. From my point of view, I would rather go to some other universities in other countries where they have a better or more experienced school of medicine than to go to a kind of free university, for example, that started a new school of medicine, for example. So, to put it in a nutshell, so again, the reduced number of students, reduced number of foreign students, reduced number of years to study. What would be the economic consequences of this?
Great question, Georgi. Thank you so much. This is very much related to previous question. And let me connect those two. So, because we have two factual situations. So first, because Georgian economy still grew quite impressively in years 2022, 2024, I would argue, because 25 is quite inflated. Salaries also grew. And also at the same time, this economic growth invited foreigners to come to Georgia. And it was not because our productivity has grown, or we people that came to Georgia were high-skilled and very productive. Just somehow it happened that a lot of capital arrived in Georgia. Maybe we will have also chance to talk about informal capital that also
flow, capital flow.
But let's say formal capital, and it made the economy attractive. But now, what we are facing is that, on the one hand, public perception of foreigners who came to Georgia, it's the same what is happening worldwide, especially in Western countries. It's not so positive. People are not so happy to have so many foreigners living in Georgia, but at the same time, it also has an economic aspect that foreigners who are coming to Georgia are willing to work for less. So, Georgian Dream has to somehow react, because people are not happy with huge influx of immigrants. So, how they react? They, for instance, now introducing new regulation from March, I guess, for work permission. It will be much stricter than it was before. So, Georgian has to react on that. At the same time, if they restrict immigration, businesses need the workforce, and the workforce, Georgian workforce, is already quite expensive. At the same time, because of emigration of youth, especially of youth, is scarce. Every survey that I have participated in or I read shows that the biggest problem businesses are facing is workforce and high expectation of this workforce on salaries. And now, to your question, what is Georgian is suggesting? Less people will study at universities. If people who are studying at universities will study less, Less people, years at schools will be less they spend. So it offers Georgian businesses more workforce for cheaper. Because if you are not at the university or have no degree and you directly from your school looking after work, your expectation on salary is less than otherwise. This is one aspect of this reform. And I think that it's very short-sighted. It's very much because we see that in European countries, in European Union, wants more more students to study more because they understand that you need more educated.
You have to be more competitive,
to be more innovative, to be more competitive, and we are doing opposite. Second thing is that it's about property, and it's about real estate, and it's about infrastructure. That I think Georgian Dream understands quite well that to attract foreign capital from Asian countries, Arab countries, they need to offer more expensive infrastructure. And here also we see that moving students outside of Tbilisi has or limiting number of students within Tbilisi will give Georgian Dream an opportunity to get this property and then sell it, and sell to businesses which are connected, and then attract foreign capital. And I think that this is also part of this reform, but never mentioned by GD officials. And third thing is that I think also important about foreign students, and this is its most peculiar thing maybe we ever heard, that state universities should not accept foreign students. It's an absurd idea.
Madness.
It's really madness, but I think the only explanation is, and I'm always saying this, that it's about also personal. This reform has also personal aspect, and it's about Tartu Foundation and Bidzina Ivanishvili. Kutaisi International University in Kutaisi is a loss-making entity. It costs Bidzina Ivanishvili and Tartu Foundation, I would say, at least 80 to 100 million lari a year. And somehow now this institution has to be financially, let's say, rescued. And the only way to do so is to send or invite foreign students who are studying in Tbilisi to Kutaisi. And this is for me the only explanation why Tbilisi State Medical University will agree on not having foreign students anymore, although it's around 120 or even more, maybe million lari revenue each year. And the only explanation is that a system will be organized in a way that foreign students will be invited to go to Kutaisi. Kutaisi International University has, I guess, already opened medical school, and this is a plan. But it's very hard to realize, and it's very hard to convince students from India, let's say, suddenly to leave Tbilisi and go to Kutaisi. But I think that it was also part of this larger grand plan. But it will be very hard to realize. But I think this is the rationale behind it. But what I want to say finally is that it also, similar to issues related to inflation, prices, and controlling businesses and creating development banks, here also you can see that Georgian Dream understands very well that they need to control academia as well. And to gain full control, they need to transform the system. And this system, the higher education system, was mainly market-based, and students were free to choose where to go, and getting grants from the state because they were gifted, but then decided by themselves where to go. And this system is disappearing now, Georgi. And we are getting the system where a state will control everything. Government decree will direct universities which programs to open, how many students to accept, etc. And yes, this looks like an effort to fully control higher education system. And what I always saying here is that now private universities are thinking that they are less affected, but this model won't work if only state universities are regulated as harsh as they are now, but private universities can continue doing their job as used to do before. So I think that this is also a gradual process, and sooner or later it will affect private universities as well. And that's why I think that this effort to coordinate and to oppose this process is very important at this moment.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. I think that private universities should be also vocal about this danger, obviously. And you mentioned, I mean, the capital inflows, legal and illegal, and maybe let's say a few words about that. Well, and also international direct investments. I mean, IDFs, which is at not historic low, but I mean, for the last 10 years or so, I think that we are getting the least international investments nowadays in Georgia. And apart from that, again, well, also this informal inflows of money is cooling off, as I understand, because, I mean, Russia adapted to the sanctions that are against them, and some of the money they wanted to whitewash or, just launder, that's already been laundered through Georgia or whatever. Also, the few weeks back, I had Tina Khidashvili, former defense secretary of Georgia, here on the show, and what she said was that now the major inflow of money is coming from the international financial institutions as loans to Georgian government, not grants, not help, not support, whatever, but the Georgian Dream government is taking loans from IMF, IDF, this Asia Development Bank particularly, and they are pouring this money into infrastructural project, and the contracts are handed out to Chinese companies, and from Chinese companies, the part of the money is kind of getting siphoned into their own pockets. So, what can you say about this money and capital inflows and outflows, formal, informal, and where are we going in that direction?
I think that we discussed a lot of topics, and I'm glad that we will touch it also carefully, because one very strange thing what is parallelly happening in Georgia is that although real economy sector is not growing in 2025, not growing, although employed people are not, number of employed people is not increasing, salaries are getting higher, but with a small percentage. Consumer spending is in Georgia increasing significantly. And the only explanation, Georgi, I have here is that in Georgia, most probably there is also the informal, let's say so, informal part of economy has become bigger in the recent years. And the stories we are hearing, some investigations our journalists are conducting, or some persecutions, for instance, about money laundering schemes. This, and also issues related to trade with informal trade with Russia, not formal one, but informal one with state Russia, gives me an impression that at the same time, behind those real figures, we have also a very big part of informal, and also, let's say, stories about these call centers present in Georgia gives me an impression, Georgi, that also a big part of Georgian economy became informal. And this is also quite, and it became informal also because of, one hand, war in Ukraine, and that Russia using Georgia as a neighboring country which is willing to do business with them, and also at the same time some criminal schemes which are directly supported by GD officials. We heard that a former head of state security services was directly, and this is not that I'm arguing or you arguing, it is officials from current officials of state security service arguing that he was kind of not only lobbying, he was kind of supporting and participating in activities of so-called call centers. So it means that for me,
more than that, the guy was bribed from a Turkish company, for $1.5 million.
And so it all, and why I'm bringing this into this big picture, Georgi, is that there are kind of parallel economies. It's not just that we have kind of a small part of informal economy that is here. It became very big, and Georgian Dream became also very much dependent, I would argue, on this part of gray or informal economy, and it's dangerous. It's bad for the health of this economic system, but at the same time, it corrupts the system as such, and we know now, at least if we believe officials who are telling us that highest officials of GD were part of this informal system, and I would say we became dependent on this system as well, and it affects youth working in these sectors. It affects state entities who are, let's say, tolerating everything what is happening, and it affects also economic agents who are indirectly benefiting from this, without knowing that this money is not kind of legal money. And I would say that, and it's very interesting, for instance, that how it, if sooner or later European Union and USA will pay attention to this, and the first case is about this Hulevi refinery, because I guess it's a top of the iceberg, but a lot of other things are happening. You mentioned the totalitarian system is costly, and I totally agree. But if Georgian economy will be more, will get poorer, and money that Georgian Dream has in state budget will get less, they will need more like such schemes to be operational. And this is very dangerous for Georgian statehood as well, because we can see now that a couple of months ago, Georgian Dream was able to anticipate that you may respond what is happening on levy, but nevertheless they done nothing. And they done nothing, I would argue, because we are getting more and more dependent on such kind of informal capital inflows, and also these money laundering schemes of 700 million euros. we once heard about it and never again. And I think this is it was not one case, it was kind of a system which was operational and maybe is operational now. What I want to say that our statehood runs the risk that if Georgian Dream gets more and more authoritarian, it will need more and more similar schemes to finance itself, and it will hurt our statehood a lot.
Well, sadly, we have to face it. Giorgi, Goga, to be more precise, thanks a lot for your time. There are a lot more questions I would like to ask, but time is against us. Is there anything else you would like to add podcast before we say goodbye to our viewers?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and it was an honor to be part of this podcast.
Once again, thank you, and thank you for watching us. A Georgian economy is booming, but we as average Georgians don't feel it, so supporting Talk Georgia is very important for Talk Georgia to continue. So subscribe on patreon.com/TalkGeorgia, or just join our YouTube channel, and if you prefer listening, don't forget Spotify. And I'll see you next week.